My life, before all this, was a testament to the predictable. My name is Arthur, and I was a mid-level analyst for a logistics company in Curitiba. My days were a comfortable loop of spreadsheets, traffic, reheated meals, and the quiet hum of my apartment. My world was built on numbers, on tangible evidence and logical conclusions. Ghosts, spirits, the supernatural. They were the stuff of fiction, the currency of charlatans and the refuge of the grieving. I believed in what I could see, touch, and quantify. Anything else was just noise. This rigid worldview was, I admit, a fortress I'd built around myself after my wife, Clara, passed away 2 years prior. Grief is a chaotic, irrational beast, and my response was to cling to order with a white-knuckled grip. Our apartment, once filled with her laughter and the scent of her paintings, became a sterile monument to routine. I kept her studio locked, the door a silent sentinel guarding a past I couldn't bear to face. My vulnerability was a locked room, and I held the only key. Or so I thought. The incursions began subtly, as they always do. It started with the smell of turpentine. Faint, almost imperceptible, it would drift into my study on quiet evenings. I'd pause, sniff the air, and dismiss it. A neighbor, perhaps. The building was old. Smells traveled. Then came the sounds. A soft thud from within Clara's studio, like a canvas falling from its easel. I'd freeze, my heart a frantic bird against my ribs, before reason would take over. The building settling. A draft. My mind, I told myself, was playing tricks, colored by a loneliness I refused to acknowledge. The true catalyst arrived on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, tucked inside a dusty box from a flea market in Largo da Ordem. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, just killing time, when I saw it. An old, ornate silver locket. It was tarnished with age, its surface etched with a weeping willow. It felt cold, unnaturally so, even in the damp air. Something about its melancholic beauty reminded me of Clara. On an impulse I couldn't explain, I bought it. It was a deviation from my routine, a small, irrational act, a crack in the fortress. That night, I sat with the locket on my desk, the rain drumming a somber rhythm against the window. I believed I was in control, that this small trinket was just a memento, a harmless link to a memory. I tried to open it, but it was sealed shut. Frustrated, I left it beside my laptop and went to bed. The first dream was vivid. I was standing in a long, dark corridor. The air was thick with the smell of decay and something else, something metallic and sweet. At the far end of the hall, a faint light pulsed from beneath a door. I felt a pull, an inexorable urge to walk towards it, but my feet were rooted to the spot. A whisper slithered through the silence, a sibilant, drawn-out sound that I couldn't quite decipher, but it filled me with a primal dread. I woke up sweating, my sheets tangled around my legs. The locket was on my nightstand. I had no memory of moving it. The next day, the disruptions grew bolder. The scent of turpentine was stronger, clinging to the curtains in the living room. I heard a faint melodic humming, the tune of a lullaby Clara used to sing while she painted. I'd follow the sound to the studio door, where it would abruptly stop. I started to feel a constant prickling sensation on the back of my neck, the undeniable feeling of being watched. My rational mind fought back, supplying a litany of excuses: stress, lack of sleep, grief manifesting in odd ways. I was a man of logic. There had to be a logical explanation. My sister, Helena, a pragmatic doctor, was my go-to skeptic. "Arthur, you're exhausted," she said over the phone, her voice a comforting dose of reason. "You've been working too hard. Grief has a long tail. Maybe you should think about selling the apartment. Start fresh?" Her words were meant to soothe, but they made me feel more isolated. She didn't understand. This wasn't just memory. It was an intrusion. Something had followed me home from that market, and I felt its presence coalescing around the locket, its new silver anchor in my world of predictable order. The fortress was being breached, not by force, but by a creeping, insidious fog that my logic could no longer penetrate. My control was an illusion, and the reality I had so carefully curated was beginning to unravel, thread by terrifying thread. The shift from subtle unease to sheer terror was not a gradual slope, but a cliff I was shoved from. The logical explanations I had clung to were ripped away, leaving me in a freefall of dawning horror. My desperate investigation began where all modern quests for answers do, online. Late at night, fueled by caffeine and a gnawing dread, I typed haunted silver locket, antique jewelry curses, and a dozen other phrases that made the skeptic in me cringe. The search results were a predictable mess of ghost stories and paranormal forums, but then I found it. A small, obscure blog post by a local historian from Paraná discussing As Lágrimas da Viúva, the widow's tears. The post detailed a 19th century legend about a wealthy baroness named Isadora who, consumed by grief and madness after her husband's suicide, commissioned a silver locket. She supposedly trapped a malevolent entity within it, a shadow collector, believing it would preserve her husband's soul. Instead, it fed on her despair, driving her to take her own life and the lives of her servants. The locket, etched with a weeping willow, was said to bring sorrow and death to whoever possessed it, feeding on their deepest vulnerabilities. My blood ran cold. The image accompanying the post was blurry, but there was no mistaking the design. It was my locket. The rational part of my brain screamed coincidence, but the humming, the cold spots, the cloying scent of decay now clinging to my clothes, it was all clicking into a terrifying pattern. The entity wasn't Clara. It was something else, something drawn to the void she had left behind. My grief wasn't a trigger, it was the bait. My next stop was the flea market. The old man who had sold me the locket was there, his stall cluttered with the forgotten relics of other lives. When I showed him a picture of the locket and asked where he'd gotten it, his face paled. He became defensive, his eyes darting around nervously. "Just a piece from an estate sale," he mumbled, refusing to meet my gaze. "From an old house up in the Serra de Mar. A tragic family." He wouldn't say more, but his fear was palpable. It was a confirmation more chilling than any confession. I knew I needed help, an ally. My first and only thought was my best friend, Marcus. He was the ultimate skeptic, an engineer who believed the universe was a machine that could be fully understood through physics. When I laid out the story for him in a crowded coffee shop, his face was a mask of pity. "Art, listen to yourself," he said, his voice gentle, as if speaking to a child. "A cursed locket? A shadow collector? You've been under immense stress. You lost Clara. It's textbook psychological transference. You're projecting your grief onto an object." "It's not in my head, Marcus. Things are happening in the apartment. Helena thinks I'm going crazy too. Maybe you just need to talk to someone. A professional," he suggested. "This isn't healthy." The conversation was a brick wall. His refusal to believe, his calm, rational dismissal of my terror, was more isolating than the haunting itself. I was alone in this. The witnesses to my sanity were turning away, leaving me to face the encroaching darkness by myself. The key that unlocked the full horror came from the one place I had been avoiding: Clara's studio. One night, a violent bang from within the room jolted me from a restless sleep. It sounded like the heavy easel being thrown across the floor. My fear was finally overcome by a surge of desperate anger. I fumbled for the key, my hands shaking, and threw the door open. The room was freezing, the air stagnant with the smell of turpentine and that sickly sweet odor of decay. Her paintings, vibrant landscapes, and portraits now seemed to hang like accusations on the walls, and on the floor, in the center of the room, lay her journal. It was open to a page near the end, a page I had never seen. Her handwriting, usually so fluid and graceful, was jagged, erratic. "It's getting stronger," she had written. "It whispers from the walls. It promises to bring him back, but the voice, it's not his. It smells of damp earth and old sorrow. It wants in. It says it's hungry. I see it in the reflections, a tall, stooped shadow with too many joints. I think it came with the old mirror I bought for the hallway. Oh God, Arthur can't know. He'd think I was losing my mind." I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat. The mirror. A large, antique standing mirror she had bought a few months before she died. We'd had it in the hallway for a while before I moved it into her studio and locked the door, unable to bear seeing her empty reflection in it. The timeline clicked into place with sickening precision. Her depression, her sudden bouts of paranoia in her final weeks. It wasn't just grief. She had been haunted. She had been fighting this thing alone, protecting me from a truth she knew I would never accept. And then I saw it. In the polished surface of the locket, which I still held in my hand, I didn't see my own reflection. For a fleeting, heart-stopping second, I saw the studio behind me, distorted and warped. And standing in the doorway was a figure, tall, emaciated, its limbs bent at impossible angles, its form a mere silhouette of deeper darkness. It had no face, only a void where features should have been. That was the moment. The moment pure, unadulterated terror washed away every last vestige of my skepticism. This wasn't a projection. This was real. The locket wasn't the source. It was a key, an amplifier. The entity had been here all along, dormant in the mirror, and my grief, my purchase of a sister object of sorrow, had reawakened its ravenous appetite. I wasn't going mad. I was being hunted, and the chilling realization settled in my soul. There was no easy escape. I was living in its nest. The revelation in Clara's studio shattered the floodgates of my denial. The horror was no longer a creeping suggestion. It was an active, malevolent presence in my home, and it was escalating with terrifying speed. The subtle hums became guttural whispers that seemed to emanate from the very walls, twisting my name into a drawn-out, mocking hiss. Arthur. The cold spots became pockets of bone-chilling frost that would materialize in the middle of a room, leaving my breath to mist in the air before vanishing. The entity, the shadow collector, began to attack me directly, preying on my mind. It learned my fears, my memories. I'd walk into the kitchen to find every cabinet door hanging open, a silent, gaping scream. I'd turn on the shower and blistering hot water would spray out, even with the knob set to cold. But its cruelest tricks were the psychological ones. It would mimic Clara's voice, a faint, weeping sound from behind the locked studio door, begging me to let her out. It was a phantom echo designed to break me, to feed the thing with the one emotion it craved above all else, my despair. My attempts to fight back were laughably futile. I brought home a priest, a young, earnest man whose faith was no match for the ancient malevolence clinging to my apartment. He sprinkled holy water and recited prayers, but the moment he left, a crucifix on the wall inverted itself and crashed to the floor. His faith was a flickering candle in a hurricane. My next call was to a team of paranormal investigators I found online. They arrived with a van full of EMF meters and thermal cameras. They recorded fluctuating temperatures and strange audio spikes, but the entity remained hidden, toying with them. As they packed up, one of the investigators, a woman with haunted eyes, pulled me aside. "Whatever is in here," she whispered, "it's old, and it's intelligent. It's letting us see what it wants us to see. You need to leave. Tonight." Her warning was unnecessary. I had already tried. I packed a bag and drove to a hotel across the city. I felt a fleeting sense of relief as I checked in, the anonymous room a sterile sanctuary. But that night, as I lay in the unfamiliar bed, the whispering started again, this time seeming to come from the television, the air vent, from inside my own head. I snapped awake to the sight of the locket on the hotel nightstand, pulsating with a faint, sickly green light. It had followed me. The horrifying truth dawned. The entity wasn't just tied to the apartment or the mirror anymore. Through the locket, it had latched onto me. Marcus, my steadfastly skeptical friend, became my next target. I called him in a panic, my voice a ragged, broken thing. "It's here, Marcus. It followed me to the hotel." I must have sounded completely unhinged. He agreed to come, his tone laced with weary concern. He found me huddled in the corner of the room, staring at the locket. He saw my terror, but he interpreted it as a complete psychotic break. "Arthur, give me the locket," he said softly, approaching me as one would a frightened animal. "No, don't touch it," I yelled. He ignored me, reaching for it. The instant his fingers brushed against the cold silver, the lights in the room exploded in a shower of sparks, plunging us into darkness. A guttural roar echoed through the room, a sound of pure hatred that vibrated in my bones. Marcus screamed, a high, thin sound of utter shock and pain. When the emergency lights flickered on, he was on the floor, clutching his hand, his face ashen. 3 long, deep scratches ran down his forearm, bleeding profusely, as if he'd been clawed by an unseen animal. He stared from his wound to me, his eyes wide with a terror that finally mirrored my own. He scrambled backward, away from me, and fled the room without another word. He never answered my calls again. The ally who refused to believe had become a victim, and in his flight, he abandoned me completely. I was truly, utterly alone. My sanity began to fray. Sleep was a luxury I could no longer afford, as every dream was a journey into the same dark corridor. Only now the door at the end was slightly ajar, and the whispers from within were clearer, promising to reunite me with Clara in exchange for my sorrow. My waking hours were a paranoid haze. I stopped going to work. I didn't answer my phone. My world shrank to the 4 walls of my apartment, which now felt less like a home and more like a tomb. The shadow collector was a constant presence. I would see it in my peripheral vision, a flicker of impossible angles in the hallway, or as a distorted, towering figure in the reflection of a darkened window. It was no longer hiding. It was wearing me down, savoring my fear, preparing for the final consumption. The lessons were brutal and clear. There is no escape, no one will believe you, and every attempt to fight only feeds the darkness. I was no longer a man living his life. I was a creature in a cage, waiting for the predator to finish its game. The breaking point arrived with a chilling quiet. For 2 days, the apartment fell silent. No whispers, no cold spots, no spectral apparitions. This absence of terror was somehow more nerve-wracking than the haunting itself. It was the calm before a storm, the deep breath a predator takes before the pounce. I knew a confrontation was inevitable. The thing in my home, this shadow collector, was done toying with me. It wanted a final resolution. It wanted to break me entirely, to feast on the scraps of my soul. My desperate, fragmented research into the locket's history had revealed one recurring cryptic phrase in the accounts of its previous owners. The sorrow must be given, not taken, at the heart of its anchor. The heart of its anchor, Clara's mirror. My fight for survival had to be on its terms, in its lair. Armed with this sliver of terrifying knowledge, I formulated a desperate, insane plan. I found a heavy sledgehammer in the building's maintenance closet. My heart pounded a frantic, primal drum against my ribs as I stood before the door to Clara's studio. This was it. A final, desperate stand. I threw the door open. The room was unnaturally cold, the air thick and heavy. The large, ornate mirror stood against the far wall, its surface not reflecting the room but swirling with a murky, black fog. And standing before it, waiting for me, was the entity. It was fully manifested now, no longer a fleeting shadow. It was a 9-foot-tall horror of emaciated limbs and twisted joints, a mockery of the human form sketched in pure darkness. Its void of a face turned towards me, and a wave of absolute despair washed over me, a sorrow so profound it brought me to my knees. It wasn't my sorrow. It was the collected agony of every soul this thing had ever consumed. This was its power. It didn't just cause fear, it mainlined despair directly into your spirit. It showed me images in my mind. Clara, her face pale and filled with terror in her final moments, whispering my name. It tried to convince me that she had taken her own life to escape it, that my inability to see her pain had doomed her. It wanted me to break, to offer my sorrow willingly. But, in its monstrous arrogance, it made a mistake. In showing me Clara's fear, it also showed me her strength. She had fought it. She had protected me. My grief, which the creature had mistaken for a weakness, suddenly forged itself into a weapon of pure rage. "You will not have her," I snarled, forcing myself to my feet, hefting the sledgehammer. "And you will not have me." I lunged forward, not at the creature, but at the mirror. The shadow collector let out a shriek, a sound of static and scraping metal that tore at my ears as it realized my intent. It moved to intercept me, its long, spindly fingers reaching impossibly fast. One of its claws raked across my chest, searing my flesh, but my momentum carried me forward. With a scream of rage and grief, I swung the sledgehammer. It connected with the mirror. The glass didn't just shatter, it exploded. A concussive blast of icy wind and screaming specters erupted from the frame, throwing me backward. The creature convulsed violently, its shadowy form flickering and tearing apart as its anchor to this world was destroyed. It turned its faceless head towards me one last time, and from the void I heard not a whisper, but a single, clear word filled with ancient hatred. Mine. Then it imploded into nothingness, leaving only a profound silence and the acrid smell of ozone. I lay on the floor, gasping for breath, my chest burning. Surrounded by the glittering dust of the shattered mirror, I had survived. But survival is not victory. The physical scars on my chest are a permanent reminder of that night, a jagged map of my confrontation with the impossible. But the deeper scars are the ones etched onto my soul. I sold the apartment, unable to spend another night within those walls. I moved to a small, anonymous town, seeking a quiet that I know I will never truly find. My life is a new, fragile equilibrium, built on a constant humming paranoia. I flinch at shadows. I avoid reflections. I can no longer find comfort in logic or reason, for I have seen the gaping, irrational maw of the abyss that lies just beneath the surface of our reality. The locket disappeared after that night. I never saw it again. But I know it's out there somewhere, waiting for another grieving soul, another crack in the fortress of a well-ordered life. The evil was not defeated. It was merely displaced. This is the terrible truth I now live with. The world is not what we think it is. We are not safe. And some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed again. I am no longer the man I was. I am a witness, a survivor marked by a knowledge that has become my own personal curse. And I am forever watching the shadows, waiting for them to take shape once more. Have you ever felt a sudden, inexplicable chill in a familiar room? Or seen a flicker of movement at the edge of your vision? Be careful. It might just be the wind. Or it might be something else, hungry and waiting. Share your own strange experiences in the comments below. Perhaps, in sharing, we can find some small comfort in knowing we are not alone in the dark. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales from the edge of reality.